Lakota chief was the last of his band after the winter plague. A healer stayed and was loved. The drum was still there. That was the thing that stayed with me through all of it, through the long empty months after, through the ice and the silence and the days I stopped eating because there was nothing in me that wanted to bother. The drum was still there, sitting in the center of the lodge like it expected something from me, like it didn't know yet. I couldn't look at it for a long time. My name, the name my people gave me, the one that means something, I won't say it here. I'll just tell you what happened, what she did, because that's the part that matters. That's the part I'll be carrying when I go. I was 39 winters old when the sickness came. It didn't come like an enemy with noise and warning. It came like cold water through a crack in stone, slow, then all at once. First the children, then the old ones, then the men and women in between, the ones who were strong, the ones I'd ridden with my whole life, the ones whose voices I knew so well I could tell who was laughing from 50 yards off without looking. I buried 41 people in 2 months. I burned the lodges of 11 families. There were mornings I'd wake up and lie still in the dark counting who was left, and the number kept getting smaller. Stands in water, my wife, went on the 38th day. She was 34 years old. She had a laugh like she was always a little surprised by something good. I haven't heard a laugh like that since. By the time the ground thawed, there were 3 of us still breathing. An old man named Two Stones, who was half blind and had survived everything his whole life because that's just who he was. A girl, maybe 12, whose whole family was gone, she hadn't spoken since her mother died, just followed me around the camp like a shadow. And me. Two Stones died in April, quietly in his sleep. I think he chose it. I think he decided the winter had taken enough from him and he was ready. The girl, I called her Little Fire because of the way she looked at things, careful and bright. She didn't speak for another 3 months after that. We lived together in the silence. I hunted. She cooked what I brought. At night she slept near the fire and I sat outside it and looked at the dark. I wasn't living. I want to be clear about that. I was moving through days because I didn't know what else to do with myself. There was no one to lead. There was no band to hold together. There was a drum I couldn't look at and 41 graves I could walk to in under an hour, and the sound the wind made through the empty lodges was something I can't describe to you and wouldn't try. That was my life. That was me. She came in late June, riding a horse that was better than she looked like she could afford, and wearing a coat too heavy for the season, and she stopped at the edge of what had been our camp and looked at the burnt circles where the lodges used to be, and she didn't say anything for a long time. I was watching her from the trees, hand on my knife. Not because I was afraid of one woman on a horse, because I'd stopped trusting that anything coming toward me came with good intentions. She had dark hair, this woman, long, pulled back loose, skin that said she'd spent time in weather. She had a leather bag on her saddle, big and worn, the kind a person fills with the tools of serious work. She looked at the graves, I'd marked them proper the way I knew how, and she pulled the coat tighter even though it wasn't cold, and something in her face changed. I couldn't read it from where I was standing, something like grief or the edge of it. Then she said out loud to nobody visible, "I came too late." And Little Fire walked out of the trees on the other side of the camp and stood there looking at her. The woman didn't startle. She looked at the girl for a long moment, then got down from the horse slowly, the way you do when you don't want to frighten something. She crouched down to the girl's level, not grabbing, not reaching, just making herself smaller, and she said something in a voice too low for me to hear. Little Fire didn't move for a while. Then she walked over and let the woman put a hand on her shoulder. I came out of the trees then. No particular reason except I figured if I was going to be a fool about this, I might as well do it properly. The woman looked up at me. She had eyes the color of creek water when the bottom is stone, gray-green, clear. She didn't flinch. She looked at me the way people look at something they need to understand, not something they need to fear. She said her name was Ruth Calloway. She said she'd been a nurse in the army years back and then a healer after that, moving through different communities, white settlers, Cheyenne, Arapaho, wherever people needed help and let her in. She'd heard about the sickness reaching our band from a trader 3 weeks back. She'd come. I told her she was too late. She said she knew. She looked at Little Fire, she said, not for everyone. I didn't have anything to say to that. She made camp near ours. She didn't ask permission, didn't make a show of it, just unrolled her things and started a fire with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. I watched her. She moved like the work mattered to her, not like she was performing something. There's a difference. I've known healers who were half theater. She wasn't. She gave Little Fire food from her own supplies that first evening. Real food, dried beef, a kind of hard bread, some dried apple that the girl ate so fast I could tell she'd been hungrier than she'd let on. She gave me some too without making it a thing. Just set a portion near me and went back to her own eating. I didn't thank her. I'm not proud of that now, but I want to be honest with you about what I was like then. I was something wrapped around a wound. I had manners still, barely, in the way a man holds himself together through habit when the actual will to do it is gone. But gratitude was a long walk from where I was standing. She stayed. That was the thing, she stayed. I kept waiting for her to say she needed to move on. I kept expecting the morning she'd just pack her horse and ride south. She didn't. A week went by, then two. She was teaching Little Fire reading a little plant medicine, how to braid a poultice wrap. The girl started talking. Not much, not all at once, but a word here, a word there, like a creek finding a new channel. I'd hear them sometimes at the edge of camp, Ruth Calloway's low voice and then a small answer, and something in me would go still for a second. I left them alone mostly. I didn't know what to do with a person who hadn't left. What happened to me was gradual. I want to be careful here because I don't want to dress it up into something it wasn't. It wasn't a moment. It wasn't one thing she said or did. It was more like a weight that I'd gotten so used to carrying I'd stopped noticing the shape of it. And then one day I looked down and realized she'd been taking it off of me, piece by piece, without asking. She'd started cooking in the evenings. I didn't ask her to, she just started. Food that was real, that had thought in it. She'd traded with a trapper for some things, found other things herself, and the meals were good in a way that meant somebody gave a damn. Not since stands in water, not since before. She asked me about the drum. We were sitting outside one night in late July, the sky doing what it does out here in summer, that deep purple that goes on forever, and Little Fire had gone to sleep, and she asked me about it. Just direct. She'd seen it in the lodge, and she wanted to know. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. I told her what the drum was for, what it meant. The ceremonies, the way it held something together, not just sound, but something older than sound. I told her the last time I'd played it was 2 nights before my wife died. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say anything soft. She looked at the fire and she said, "Do you think she'd want it silent?" I sat with that for a long time. No, I said, she wouldn't. Ruth Calloway nodded like that was the end of that, and maybe the beginning of something else. I got sick in August. I don't know what it was, not the same sickness, something different, something ordinary that my body just didn't have the fight to hold off. I came in from a hunt one evening and I sat down and didn't get back up. Fever. My bones felt like they'd been replaced with something heavier. I remember thinking, flat on my back, that maybe this was the thing, maybe this was how I was going to go, and somewhere under the fear there was something that wasn't entirely opposed to it. I don't like admitting that, but it's true and you deserve the truth of it. Ruth Calloway sat with me for 3 days and nights. I wasn't aware of all of it. I was in and out, but I was aware of her. Her hands, she had hands that knew what they were doing, strong and sure, nothing tentative about them. She'd put a cloth on my head and check my breathing and feed me broth that tasted like she'd put everything she had into it. And I remember once, in the deep of a bad night when the fever was high and I was shaking and I didn't know where I was, she took my hand in both of hers and held it, just held it, and said nothing. And that was the thing that kept me here. That one thing. The pressure of her hands and the silence and the fact that she was still there. I broke the fever on the fourth morning. Came back to myself slowly, the way you do, the world arriving in pieces, sealing first, then sound, then the weight of the body you're back inside. She was there. Asleep in the chair she'd dragged in from outside, her head tipped back, her hair loose around her face. She'd been up 3 nights. I lay there and looked at her, and I don't know what word to put on what I felt. Not love yet, that came later, slower, the way real things do, but something before love. Something like the understanding that she had chosen in a plain and practical way to keep me alive. Not because she was paid, not because she had to, but because she decided I was worth it. I'd spent a year believing that wasn't true. She woke up maybe an hour later and looked at me, and her face changed quick, just a flash, something that went from tight to open, and she said, "Well, you're still here." I said, "Appears so." She got up and made broth and brought it over and sat down again and watched me drink it, and I think that was the moment something shifted. Not a declaration. Not anything said. Just her sitting there in the morning light with her hands around her own cup and me looking at her and understanding that she wasn't going anywhere. That she knew what she was staying for, or had started to know. Little Fire knew before either of us admitted it. Children always do. She started calling Ruth Calloway something in Lakota, a word that means, roughly, the woman who holds things together. I didn't correct her. It was October when Ruth and I first talked about what was between us. Plainly, the way people talk about things they need to face. We were walking the edge of the valley and the aspens were turning, that yellow that looks like they're lit from inside, and she stopped and looked at them and said, "I keep not leaving." I said, "I noticed." She turned and looked at me then, clear-eyed, same as that first day. She said, "I want to know if that's all right." I could have made a thing of it. I didn't. I said, "It's more than all right." She looked at me for another moment like she was making sure I meant it. I did. She nodded once, like a woman satisfied with the answer she came for. Then she started walking again. That was us. That's how it was. We didn't mark it with any ceremony right away. That came later, our own way, in the spring. The winter we just lived, the 3 of us together in the lodge, the drum coming back slowly, a little at a time, me finding my way back to the things I knew how to do. Hunting, and then teaching Little Fire to track, keeping the fire, small governance of the small world we had. Ruth seeing patients sometimes at trappers, traders, a Cheyenne family that came through in November. She was good. I watched her work when she'd let me, and I understood why she'd spent her life on it. She had a gift, and she used it without ego, which is the best way to have a gift. I found I could look at the drum again. First just looking. Then one night, with the snow coming down quiet outside and Little Fire asleep and Ruth sitting across the fire working on something with her hands, I picked it up. I just held it for a while. The weight of it is specific. I can't explain it to you, but it has a weight that's about more than the wood and the hide. I felt it, the whole thing, everything that drum had ever held. And I didn't run from it this time. I played it soft that night. Just the heartbeat rhythm, the one that's older than any song. Ruth looked up. She didn't say anything. She listened with her whole self, the way she did everything, attentive and still. And when I stopped, she put down what she was working on and came and sat beside me and put her head against my shoulder. She fit there, is the only way I can say it, the way things fit when they've found where they belong. We stayed like that a long time, the fire going low, the snow doing what snow does. And I sat in that quiet with my drum in my lap and this woman against my shoulder, and I was not fixed, you understand. Not as if the winter hadn't happened. Not as if all those graves weren't out there under the snow. But I was here, still here, and she had something to do with that, more than something. She will tell you if you ask her that she just did what she does. She'll tell you she stayed because the work wasn't done, and there was a girl who needed somebody and a man who needed to not die, in more than the fever sense of the word. She's practical about most things. Ruth Calloway is. Practical and clear. But I know what I know. I know what it took to stay in that stripped-down camp with its burnt circles and its rows of graves. I know what it asked of a person that winter to choose it. She could have gone south to Fort Laramie, found a post that needed a healer, had a warm building and regular meals and other people. She chose this instead. She chose me. Not out of rescue instinct, not out of something soft and sorry for the broken chief. She looked at what I was, all of it, the grief and the silence and the years of it, and she decided it was worth staying for. That is the thing I carry. Spring came the way it always does out here, not announcing itself, just suddenly being there, the mud, the first green at the low edges of things, the smell of the earth opening up. I played the drum again in the spring, out in the open, a ceremony just the three of us. For the ones we'd lost, for the ones who stayed. Ruth stood beside me and little Fire danced the way I'd taught her, not perfectly, but with the particular seriousness of a child learning something that matters. When I was done, I looked at Ruth. She had her eyes closed. Her face was turned a little toward the sky. I don't know what she was doing, praying, maybe, or just being in it. The morning light on her face was the kind of thing I could probably describe badly, and I won't try. I just watched her. Then she opened her eyes and she saw me looking and she smiled. A small smile, real, and she reached out and took my hand. That was it. That was the whole of it. The drum was still there, and so was I, and so was she. There's not much more to tell you beyond that, because that's where the story ends and the living starts, and the living is mine, and not for telling. We made our life. We made it out of what was left and what she brought and what little Fire turned into, which was something that would have made my wife smile, I think, because the girl had that same capacity for being surprised by good things. I am an old man now, and my hands are not what they were. The drum is across the room from where I'm sitting. I could reach it in 3 steps. I know its weight without picking it up. And Ruth is asleep in the next room. She still has that coat that was too heavy for the season. It hangs on a peg by the door. I look at it sometimes, the particular worn brown of it, one button replaced with a different one because the original was lost. I don't know why I look at it. Something about it being the first thing I saw of her. The woman on the horse at the edge of the camp looking at the burnt circles, who said I came too late and then stayed anyway. She didn't come too late. She came when she was needed, which is a different thing, which is, I think, the whole of what I have to say.